want to fund these conservative programs, but the reality is if they're wealthy, they're going to lose their job. They're going to lose their board seats if they're out affiliated with conservative politics, right? Now, I think you're seeing a kind of counter backlash now where people are on the left are feeling the same thing, and I oppose either of those. But we are actually a vehicle for anonymous free speech where you can just actually contract with us and we'll do everything for you.
Yeah, well, Adam Swart, you're the founder and CEO of Crowds on Demand, which is an amazing concept, man. I can't even. That's it's genius. It really is. How did you get into that? What was your first? Did you know that you wanted to go into like protesting and all that stuff before when you started Crowds on Demand, or did it start as something else?
Sure. Well, I wouldn't say I knew, but I would say I've always been interested in activism and how the context of everything matters. So I always like to say that imagine the greatest speeches in history delivered to a tiny audience, right? Imagine Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech delivered to 10 people. It wouldn't have the same resonance, even though those words were equally beautiful, right?
Right.
So I kind of got the start of this in college when I worked for a lot of political campaigns, and I would always kind of have this challenge that the guys who were running the campaigns, these were like kind of hippies out of the 60s, used to the world where you could draw like tens of thousands of students, no problem. And they sort of put those same expectations upon me. And I was like, guys, this is much more challenging than you think in the age of the smartphone and so many demands on our entertainment. But what I found is number one, when you're able to get, 100 people, 200 people, even if it's not thousands, you can change the context, right, of a
Right.
rally. But even more so, that the value of a protest is even bigger because your adversary could be hosting a rally with 5,000 people. You put 50 people outside, right? So that's a fraction of the number. And you can often get yourself to equal airtime in the media, right? Because the media is covering candidate X is hosting a rally, but they're also covering, well, these protesters are upset about candidate X for whatever
Right.
reason, right? So that's actually a huge value is I can show up with 50 and maybe get a third of the attention as somebody with 5,000, right? So that's actually a pretty good bang for your buck. Um, and obviously, we experimented with incentivizing people to go, generally not in cash compensation at that time. But then when I started Crowds on Demand, this was in Los Angeles, California, right? A home of many, many out of work actors who are searching for occupations, right? And I was
Yeah.
like, well, who better to participate in these sort of crowd-based events than actors, right? So now I have to say for your audience, we've changed the model a little bit since then,
Yeah,
where
absolutely. Because you guys, you've been you founded this in 2008, correct?
12,
Two,
12.
okay, 2012. So I mean, that's 13 years. So over the course of 13
Right.
years, of course, you have to switch up business practices and
Right.
strategies. Otherwise, you're not going to survive.
Well, I also think part of it is the idea of how do I make sure that I'm contributing the best way possible? And this idea that we were having actors engage in political events is not necessarily the way I want to staff political events. I kind of got to thinking several years back is what we want to do is have people who are activists who are sincerely passionate about the cause. So when there's an advocacy, so we still use actors for a lot of events, for example, PR stunts, right? Like
Right.
product launches, that type of thing. We do that a lot as well. And that we will use actors for, wearing silly
Yeah.
costumes, etc. But when it's a political event, I don't want to staff a political event with essentially actors who are not actually engaged with the subject.
Right. So you vet all of your crowds, correct?
That's right. That's right. And a lot of people don't know that before each and every event, I have someone, sometimes multiple people, actually call each participant and talk them through the politics of the event, right? And the specifics of, hey, this is the concept, this is the cause, this is the campaign, right? Do you agree with it? I always think of it as a reverse jury questionnaire because a jury questionnaire is trying to say, are you unbiased, right? Like,
Right.
you you don't have any problems with the police, but you're not associated with the police, for example, right? Whereas if we're doing a pro police rally, I want you to be pro police, right? So
Right. So your job would be find their biases and use those biases to further not really advance your cause, but really kind of just help everybody that's involved.
that's correct. That's correct. That's correct because what we want to do is it's you're a better advocate if it's something you actually you care about, right? So the way
Right.
I look at it is what we do is we facilitate people's participation in the democratic process because for a lot of people it's really challenging to actually get out there to a protest, right? Like if you live, let's just say suburban, exurban New York City, right? And you're going to go to a protest. That means taking a half day off of work, maybe taking a day off of
Yes.
work, right? So now, if you're a tech worker with a flexible job, easy peasy, right? If you're someone who's well to do, who has a good childcare situation, very easy. But if you're a working class person who's trying to figure all this stuff out, right? Those
So you're
voices.
just essentially, those people would be just essentially hiring people to go in their place.
Well, correct. The way that I see that, well, a little bit. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of almost a Civil War analogy. The people did that in the Civil War.
Right.
You'd actually pay on both sides. They'd pay someone to fight in their place, which is funny. But in a way, I mean, I guess you could look at it that way. But I would also look at it as that the paid participation is understanding that when you're doing a rally, when you're doing an event, you need a certain number of people coming and you need a certain level of control over what happens, right? And there's been many instances too where uncontrolled crowds can actually really distract from the point of why the protest is there. So one value that we provide is is of essentially getting the having a more controlled narrative. It's still people passionate about a cause, but it's a controlled narrative that is more helpful sometimes because, okay, we're talking about the environment. Well, we don't necessarily need someone with a Palestine flag there,
Right.
right? Like,
Right.
even though maybe those are both movements that could be associated with the left, Palestine has absolutely nothing to do with the environment. And by having some guy who shows up with a Palestine flag, that could really distract from someone who might support you on the environment, but who doesn't support the Palestine issue.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah, and this isn't a totally new concept. I mean, back in the 60s and 70s when there were a lot of political protests, essentially there were organizers who essentially
yeah,
did the same job that you do right now, and
yeah.
they were often a lot less scrupulous in their practices than you are, and where they didn't vet people, and their main objective was to cause disruption.
Oh,
Your
that it was,
main
and they would say it. They were open about that.
And your main objection basically is to put asses in the seats and not not just get asses in the seats, but also those asses in the seats must align with what they're with the event that they're going to. Like you wouldn't
Correct.
hire an actor to go. You wouldn't hire a male actor to go play a female actor's part,
No,
or
probably
vice
not.
versa.
Probably
And
not.
I think it's very interesting because it's almost like it's not really exploiting a loophole. It's finding a niche,
Yeah,
and it's really incredible how all that stuff has grown and gained attention over time. And now we're talking about it in mainstream media
of course.
about how there's a lot of people on the left who are hiring their crowds. And
Yeah.
that's been a big talking point. But from what I understand, both sides do it, correct?
Both sides do it. It's not just on the left. I mean, and again, like as I outlined, it's not necessarily bad. We serve a lot of conservative clients too, and I'll tell you part of the value of it is two reasons, right? So many wealthy conservatives historically, especially under Biden administration, cancel culture, all that, they would always tell me, I want to fund these conservative programs, but the reality is if they're wealthy, they're going to lose their job. They're going to lose their board seats if they're out affiliated with conservative politics, right? Now, I think you're seeing a kind of counter backlash now where people are on the left are feeling the same thing, and I oppose either of those. But we are actually a vehicle for anonymous free speech where you can just actually contract with us and we'll do everything for you. So you give us a budget and you tell us what exactly it is you want us to go about accomplishing, and we will work on those things on your behalf. So we're actually a vehicle for that anonymous free speech. So that's one. And number two, the other benefit that we provide for conservatives is that liberals, the left is generally has a better history of activism because it's a naturally oppositional force, right? I mean, you referred to the protests of the 60s, right? Um, the left has a history of organizing. The
Right.
right doesn't, right? So the right is just not as good at it as it, number one. Number two, as all my conservatives friends will say, oh, well, conservatives have real jobs, they have families, they have all that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think everyone has jobs and families, but it is true that one thing that I've noticed is conservatives tend to be more likely to have traditional jobs such as 9 to 5. So I'm not taking a
Right.
position like flexible work is great too, but people on the left in big cities are often more likely to have flexible jobs that where you might be able to take time off during the day, whereas conservatives are more likely to have sort of traditional 9 to 5 type jobs that don't lend themselves to that. And conservatives, by their very nature, are more likely to have kids, right? That's fine. So those are all things that can sort of get in the way of participating in protests. So it's just as important, if not more important, for conservatives to sort of fund these sorts of efforts as it is for folks on the left.
Right. And you mentioned something that's very important to me, free speech.
Yeah,
That is, I'm almost so I would almost consider myself a free speech absolutist. And
yeah,
so I support, even if I don't agree with you personally, I
yeah.
support your right for free speech. I actually support everything about your business because like I'm a capitalist. I love capitalism.
Yeah.
And it brings me to my next question. Do you do you ever think about who's funding these things?
Well, first of all, yeah, so it's a really good question. Sometimes right? So some of our events are as simple as you're funding a protest because you're to raise awareness about a new building in your neighborhood that's going to be very destructive to the local homeowners, right?
Right.
So, okay, that makes sense. The local homeowners fund it, or maybe there's one really rich homeowner that funds it, right? Okay, that makes sense. But where it's complicated is more on the national political level is there are layers on layers on layers, right? So it's what I
Yes.
call the Russian doll model. So who you are working for is may not be who you are actually who let me rephrase it. Who you think you are working for may not be who you are working for. There are
Right.
several layers behind it. So if you think about, okay, you think you're working for a conservative group, but that's actually maybe behind that conservative group is someone else, right? Who you
Right.
disagree with, or vice versa. And the reality is you never really know Well, you can't ever say that for sure, for certain. What you can try to parse is what we're doing the right thing? That's what I
Right.
always say to any activist, because I mean, this is the United States of America. We're all the tool of some sort of oligarch structures in some way or another. Let's not pretend, right? I mean, I was just listening to an interview with Mr. Anti-oligarch Bernie Sanders, who I think you and I both have a probably similar view of. And he was saying, what, you want me to wait in line at United? When he was asked about his extensive use of private jet. It's like, yes, I do want you
Yeah.
to wait in line at United, by the way. If you're not an oligarch, I mean, that sounds like an oligarch. I mean,
Right.
Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, they're not going to wait at United, but at least they're honest that they think they're better than everybody else. I mean,
That's right. Right. Yeah, I completely agree. So we've talked about vetting
yeah,
the crowds
yeah.
and the people in the crowds. How do you vet who's paying you? Like, how do you vet who funds this stuff?
Well, as I was kind of getting to, I always my bigger focus, number one, is I want to make sure that we're not inadvertently doing the dirty work of some sort of foreign regime or hostile actor. And one thing that you have to keep in mind when you're dealing with a kind of hostile foreign regime, is there are certain countries where they are so authoritarian that any citizen of that country has to be considered like a possible servant of that regime, right? Because
Right.
essentially those countries exact such authoritarian rule upon their populace that essentially if they tell some business person contract with your firm or my firm, then they will do it. But at the end of the day, you're working for that regime. So part of it is like to try to avoid working with people from certain countries that are hostile to the United States, because they should just be assumed to be arms of that, because there isn't such thing as private enterprise in many
Right.
of countries. And I won't name countries, but I think you can kind of probably figure out what countries
Oh
those
yeah.
where they're
Absolutely.
where the people have no rights, and everyone in the country is essentially, and it's not to say that there aren't great people in those countries, but essentially we would be doing the same thing. But in the United States, Americans are not arms of the American government, right? Like the CIA couldn't come to you, Ricky, and say, Ricky, you work for us now, and this is what you're gonna do, right? Or at
Right.
least I would hope that they wouldn't do that. I don't think they do that, right? Only in the movies. Um, but in a lot of these other regimes, that's kind of exactly what happens. So number one is to kind of try to avoid actors from some of those regions. But like I said, the second is to sort of resign yourself to the fact that there's only so much you can do. And you also, like, here, let me use an example, right? My liberal and conservative friends go wild when I kind of say this, both very in a very hostile manner. But like, look at like Soros, right? He's kind of like the boogeyman for the right. They hate him. They're like Soros,
Yes.
like Voldemort and Palpatine, like rolled into one, right? But
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, how do you know that Soros is not actually funding Trump, right?
Yeah,
How do you know that?
there's no way to tell. Honestly, I mean, the way you're doing it, like I think there's a lot of integrity in the way you're doing it because like all of this stuff is out there, and when you're from what I am understanding is through your vetting, when you're vetting who's paying you or who's funding things, you ultimately go back as far as you can. And if you
Yeah.
discover something that you don't agree with or something that looks bad, you just pass on that client.
I mean, we like that's exactly right, because we've been in business for 13 years, so we don't need every last client, you know? So if something doesn't feel like if I get a bad feeling about it, then I just won't do it, you
Right.
know? Because if I feel like the client is being cagey about what they're trying to do, because part of it is to work with the client. I like for the client to say, this is what I'm looking to do, right?
Right.
But mostly what I'm doing is analyzing that part and saying is that if we accomplish what that the client is looking to do, will we make society better, worse, or no difference, right? So if it's better, amazing. If it's no difference, well, that's fine. And if it's worse, then no, we won't do it.
Right. So with funding and thinking about all of that stuff and also vetting crowd members and actors and stuff like that, you see some of these protests and some of these events, you do see a shaping of the narrative. You do see a coordinated effort to go down certain paths. Is there any, do you see a lot of that when you're dealing with these people? Do you see weaponized narratives or anything like that?
Well, like what's an example of a weaponized narrative in your mind?
Well, in my opinion, those, so the Palestine protests,
Mhm.
those are, I don't know a single person that is on that side of the aisle personally.
Sure.
I do live in the middle of America. I live near Kansas City, Missouri,
Mhm.
and for me, I see a lot of nefarious actors at these protests. I don't see organic growth of these protests, and when there's a lot of people when certain folks are arrested at those protests, it seems like those protests just kind of go away. And like we haven't
Yeah.
had any of those here personally, but like I've seen the ones on the television. I've seen the way the media reports things. I see all kinds of people that almost you can almost be certain they're there for nefarious reasons.
Well, there are two things. So, like in regards to Palestine protests, right? One of the things about the left that they do better than the right is they coalition build pretty well. So part of this Palestine thing is that you have a lot of people who don't really understand Palestine, but they see it through the structure of kind of oppressor versus oppressed, sort of this social justice warrior concept thing. So people who might be on BLM supportive of like BLM, right, might then say, oh, well, it's the same thing. The struggle of the Palestinian people is the same as the struggle of the black people, right?
Right.
So I guess that's fine in a way. I mean, I think I would rather people look at these sort of the nuances of every situation, but
Yeah.
I do
Because
think
that is a very Western centric way of looking at things. Like if
it
they
is.
really, if they lived there and they saw everything going on, I don't think they'd be as pissed off as they are, to be honest with you. And I see
I
these
don't think they would
protests
be
happening
celebrating.
everywhere. And you know that you, I know for certain, I don't know any people that would protest for Palestine. But then you hear the chants, death to America, death
Yeah,
to Israel.
it's
I
very
don't
true.
like that. That's not something that I know
They're hurting their
anybody
own
that would speak
message
like
too.
that.
I think there's a message to be said that's compelling in regards to saying, look, there are a lot of innocent Palestinian people who are being bombed and being attacked and who had no role in October 7th. And, that part is wrong. Um,
Right.
I think there's a legitimate narrative. I think they do a lot of disservice to their cause when they start saying the things that you said or kind of glorifying Hamas, right? I think that there is a reasonable stance that is like, hey, stop bombing us, stop cutting off our food, like those sorts of things. I think that's legitimate. I mean, and I would say this, right? They don't do a service to their cause, the Palestine activists, when they chant death to Israel, death to America, or
Right.
glorify what they'll do is often glorify Hamas or just pretend that stuff never happened, the horrors of October 7th, which is also pretty reprehensible, right? So I condemn that, but I also kind of condemn what a lot of Israel activists are doing, which is trying to say everything is anti-Semitic now, right? Is that like I think
You
we've
caught that too, huh?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we've cheapened these terms. So, like, think about racism. Racism means nothing now, nothing,
Right.
right? Because they've cheapened it, right? 10 years ago, someone was like, "Oh, you're a racist." It's like, "Oh my God." Like, "No, I'm not." Like, now it's sort
Right.
of like, "Oh, like you're a racist because you looked at a white person before you looked at a black person, and that's a microaggression, and you may as well you're a racist, right? So it's like, well, those terms mean nothing anymore. So now my concern is anti-Semitism is an evil thing,
Yes.
but you cannot say that critiquing Israel's war in Gaza is anti-Semitic. It's not anti-Semitic, right? You could
Well, I mean,
say
even if it is, let's just say, even if it is, though, I support freedom of speech. I
oh, me
believe
too. Yeah,
as long as it doesn't cross outside of like speech or
yeah,
expression,
yeah.
because
I agree.
T-shirts and stuff like that, that's free speech, that's expression. Reporting on things, that's a First Amendment right too. I believe in all that stuff 100%. I'm not anti-Semitic, nor do I agree with anti-Semitism. I'm
100%.
uh, I'm I'm actually pro-Israel. I'm not pro-Palestine. So and I I
You
feel
support the
like
right of the Palestine people to speak, and they're
exactly
doing so non-violently, right? And by the way,
right.
my thing is, and this actually gets to a point where I think you and I are 100% in lockstep, which is I think when people are talking about free speech, they're saying, oh, this is offensive and this is not offensive. This is okay. This is not okay. They're actually they're making a big mistake, which is that people need to be judged solely on their actions, not on
Yes.
their words. So if a neo-Nazi is hosting a peaceful protest, they are allowed to host that protest.
Right.
Meanwhile, if a BLM is hosting a violent protest, that is unacceptable, right? So you are, even if one cause may be more virtuous than the other, right? So I think that when we start causes based on judging actions based on the offensiveness of the remarks. So, like when we're talking about the Palestine protests, I would say focus on, okay, are they blocking roads? Are they violent? Are they having these checkpoints, right? That and like not letting Jewish kids go to class. These things are illegal, right?
Right. Right.
River to the sea. Okay, that we can debate whether that's offensive or not. I think it is, right? Some people might say it's not.
It may
People,
be offensive, but I'm
but
in
they
the
have the
camp
right
of
to
they
do it.
have the right to say it.
And so I guess my point is that I think people should only be judged on actions. Now, Ricky, what do you think though when it comes to these students being deported for the Palestine protests? I mean, I'm mixed on it because on the one hand, right, these
I'm mixed on it too. It's very nuanced.
but
It's
I'm
how do you
still
say
again,
that you don't agree with it, but you do agree with it? Yeah, how do
well,
you say that?
I think the challenge is with all this stuff is that it when it comes to who we want in our country, right? So US citizens have an absolute right to say what they want without penalty, right?
Right.
Whereas someone who's visiting obviously has limits. Now, I'm mixed because let's just say hypothetically you had an Austrian exchange student who started a neo-Nazi group, a peaceful neo-Nazi group, right? And it was growing on campus, and they had this huge neo-Nazi rally, but it was peaceful. I think you'd have a lot of people saying we should deport this Austrian exchange student who started that group, right?
It
So
kind of depends on what he did. To
right,
be honest
but
with you, it really kind of depends. I think you do have to take those things by case
I think
basis.
so too. I think so too, but I think that but in one sense I agree with you, but in one sense I strongly disagree with you, Ricky, and I'll tell you why I disagree with you. I think when it comes to freedom of speech, we need actually more written standards and less case by case basis standards. And the reason is, as an absolutist and as an advocate for freedom, I believe case by case standards can be abused where, oh, there's a Republican. prosecutor, oh, they're going to charge the left wing agitators.
That's
The
very interesting.
Democrat
You're
prosecutor, they're going to charge the right wing agitators. I would rather they say, if you vandalize a building, this is the penalty. Doesn't effing matter why you vandalized the building. It could be for protesting the genocide in, Sudan. It could be for, any possible reason, right?
so
So
that way that you can avoid the rules for thee but not for me
exactly,
situation.
because there's both sides are constantly claiming, the Republicans are like, oh, well, the January 6th people got harshly penalized, but the BLM people didn't. And then the BLM people say the same thing. And it's like, well, in some cases, they're both right. So my thing is, if you vandalize the building, here's a penalty. If you hurt someone, here's the penalty, right? If you trespass, here's the penalty,
Because
right?
then it goes outside of free speech and free expression.
Correct, because that's not freedom of expression. But the fact that you were chanting something offensive to me should not have any bearing on the penalty, right? Like it might be offensive to me, but you might agree with it. So the
Yes.
thing is, there's a reason why the ACLU, before they sort of sold out, Jewish ACLU lawyers defended neo Nazis. Actually, they weren't even neo Nazi, they were like Nazis in
Nazi
the
Nazis, yes.
who were marching. I mean, just horribly, despicably through a Jewish city of not super far from you in the Midwest is in Skokie, Illinois, which is outside of Chicago, and this was home to many Holocaust survivors. So about this is as reprehensible of a form of speech as imaginable. Nazis marching, hiling through a town with people who survived the Holocaust.
Yes.
And yet, many Jewish lawyers at the ACLU said the only way we can make sure that our free speech rights are protected is if
Is
we
to protect
protect
theirs.
these absolute horrible people, right? And there was something truly noble about what they did. And because that's why we have real free speech in America, not fake free speech like they have in England, right? Like, look at what I mean, I don't know whether you follow some of the stuff that they do in England where like you can be arrested for an offensive social media post in
Yeah, but
England.
then who decides what's offensive? That's where it
So
gets
that's
into
what I don't
sticky
like.
territory.
So I give huge credit to those ACLU lawyers for saying, look, we have to stand up for the most despicable, offensive free speech because only then will we know that other speech is protected. Because
Because they've actually seen the consequences of holding speech down and
correct.
oppressing speech.
And that's
And
why
that
I'm supportive, by the way, of like I think the Democrats are making made a mistake in making this Kilmar Abrego Garcia into a hero. I don't think he's a hero, but I would put him in the same category as those neo Nazis, right? In Illinois, I would say he's probably a despicable person, but he still deserves his rights. And
right.
if we're not willing to protect the rights of Abrego Garcia, then none of us can be 100% sure of our rights. So I think the Democrats missed an opportunity to say what the ACLU did. It's like, we think the Nazis are despicable scum. I think Abrego Garcia, I mean, I don't know everything about him, but everything I've heard about him, he's probably a scumbag. But
Yeah, I think he is who they say he is, but that doesn't
that's
mean
got to be
that
proven. They've got to prove
you're
it.
right. Right.
They've got to
That's
prove
the
it.
thing. He doesn't. So whether we agree with him or not, there are certain processes that we have
Yeah.
that we have to keep in place even for everybody that we don't agree with, because
Yeah.
if it's really, it makes it impossible to protect the ones that we do agree with if we don't.
Yes. Oh,
And
correct.
I what I see with what I see with that whole deal is I think people are just focused on the wrong part of the argument. I think that instead of focusing on gang member or not a gang member or assault or any of that stuff, instead of focusing on that stuff, we should really kind of focus on why did he get deported, and did he have due process before he was deported?
Yeah.
And if he didn't have due process, why didn't he have due process? Because that's a requirement.
Correct. And I just don't like, as a constitutionalist, I don't like the idea of people kind of just getting thrown into a van, taken to a plane, and sent somewhere without any kind of opportunity to advocate on their own behalf.
Right.
So,
Now,
and I,
I'm willing to allow I'm willing to allow certain things like that to happen in certain contexts. Now, like the Alien Immigration Act.
yeah,
I Whether I agree with it or not, it is a thing. And whether I agree with it or not, I think there is a case to be made that it right now is a perfect time to use that. However, something that Donald Trump said that really struck, and I love Donald Trump. I voted for Donald Trump, and I'm neither Republican nor Democrat,
mhm.
but I really love Donald Trump. He's hilarious. But one thing that he said, he had said something about building prisons in other countries for Americans.
Unacceptable.
That is unacceptable, in my opinion. I'm not. I don't. In
And
There's
by the
no
way, it's
case that can.
unconstitutional. It's
Yeah, there's no
unconstitutional. The
case
Eighth
that can be
Amendment.
made. There's
Yes,
no case to be made for that.
it's a complete violation of the Eighth Amendment. Cruel, no cruel and unusual punishment. Being sent to a third world gulag is both cruel and it is unusual, right? Not since the British Empire sending prisoners to Australia has this been done. So it's an
Right.
absolutely absurd concept. But I mean, again, I think he floats these concepts but I mean, and I think it's like a very bad thing that he does this stuff and he just sort of jokes about violating the Constitution because I think that the Constitution is something holy to those of us who've studied it. And and I think that it's so important that we protect those rights. And as someone who has been on the other side of the justice system as he has seen sort of the nastiness because I do think some of it was politically motivated. I think he's his own worst enemy in other ways, but I think that certainly at least in some of these cases he was certainly singled out, right? But try to make it fair and try to put in he's really missed an opportunity to make the system fairer and to say, look, we're going to protect both liberals and conservatives from political prosecution. And here's a set of reforms we're going to do to make it less political,
But
right?
instead, he's going and doing the exact same shit.
For example, I don't believe the president should have pardon power. I mean, what the heck is that? Like, if that is not a grift, I don't know what is. I mean, between like Joe pardoning his son, I mean, and Trump pardoning all these people, like Trump pardoned his like I think um his in-law
There's
Carl.
there's been it's countless. Like since he's been in office, just this time, it's been countless. I don't even
I
know.
don't like the
I
pardon
think
power. I believe that the pardon, I actually have a different theory where, I mean, I think the pardon is a constitutional power of the president, but I think it's been so massively abused. Like,
yes.
I can think of a situation where a president would have to pardon someone. For example, in the event of some sort of prisoner exchange with another country, right? I understand that, but even then, don't you think it should be some sort of Senate committee that should sort of an intelligence
Or
committee
Congress or
or
Congress.
Congress that should have to sort of agree to this because most of the people pardoned, it's not for national security reasons. It's like, Bill Clinton pardoned his donors, right? Joe Biden. I mean, this is all just this graft. It's just like ambassadorships. Like people just buy ambassadorships. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
Like they literally just go to the highest bidder, Democrat, Republican administration. They just go to the highest bidder. I mean, it's like it is insane. But I mean,
Yes.
ambassadorships, that's not a hill I'm going to die on because it's just like, it kind of is what it is. But the pardon power and the justice system really needs to be reformed to make it completely apolitical. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
One
And I
thing that I would
think,
like to do, by the way, is to say that prosecutors should not be allowed to run for office. What
boom,
about
I
that?
agree. I
Because
agree with
because
you.
what a lot of times people do is on a local or like national level is you have prosecutors who they make a big name for themselves. They go after some big target on the other on one side or the other, and then they run for office the next year and say, "I went after that guy. I
Yeah.
went after him hard." And it's like so then they win, but it's like
And then the rest of the time they're busy working on the party lines.
yeah, and I don't like that. So I would like to see just sort of institutional reform there to just take politics out of the justice system
Hell
completely.
yeah.
And but
Hell yeah.
I'm not thrilled with what has been going on the Trump side. So I would like him to like return to constitutional principles of free speech, free expression, um, and all of that.
Hell yeah. The Constitution, man. I when you said that you're a constitutionalist, I knew that like, hey, we can get along regardless of which side you're on.
Yeah.
Because like when you don't think of things like Democrat, Republican, Independent, when you don't think of things like that, but you think of things like, well, you know, I agree with the Constitution and it's right there in black and white. We should follow that because that's what our leaders wanted
And
back in
by
the
the
day.
way,
And
those guys are geniuses because,
yes,
and I'll tell you why they're so much smarter than the people who designed the constitutions in any other country, right? As I think it was Madison who said, it's ambition counteracting ambition. So they didn't design the Constitution based on the idea that our people would do the right thing. They actually did. The reason why our constitutional government is still standing 250 years later is actually because they based it on us doing our leaders doing the wrong thing. It's basically the not even the wrong thing, it's the search of power. So the reason why when Nancy Pelosi was speaker and Trump was president, the reason why there's a checked and divided government and Trump has a limit on his power and Pelosi had a limit on her power, it's not because Trump's a great guy or Pelosi is a great person. Pelosi wants to maximize her power as
yeah,
Speaker of the House. Trump wants to maximize his power as president. So it naturally comes up against each other. Same with the Supreme Court also. So it's the idea that, hey, all of these branches of government are power mad grifters. So put them all up against each other to make sure that no one actually gets to be tyrannical. So
right.
that's the genius of it. Most of these other government systems that are designed and fail are based on the idea that people will do the right thing. No, they won't. They
You're
want to do
right.
the thing that gets them the most power. So that's sort of the challenge is that's why it's so genius and that's why these guys are truly like legends for doing it. I mean, I'm not like this move by people on the left and the right in different for different reasons to sort of like poo-poo our constitution is just crazy because like there's no other government that has kind of existed under one set of documents for this long and
Right.
mostly got it right.
Right. And you know what, Adam, I think that's a great place to leave this conversation, man. I got one more quick question for you.
Sure.
Outside of protests, what is your biggest event like that you do the most?
I would say like product launches and audiences. So one
Hell
of the
yes.
things that we do is like if you're a company, you want to make a splash at like a big trade show convention, we put together like kind of a huge kind of it's like a fun protest. I we were in I was actually in I'll tell you a quick story. I was in Boston the other day and we were doing kind of a launch for like a product at a big trade show and we he the cops outside thought it was a protest and it was funny because it was so obviously like a fun event with costumes and stuff like that and the cop was like what is this protest what are you guys doing here and it was a very thick accent Boston accent and I was like it's a PR stunt and he was like a PR stunt and I was like he was like what is that I was like it's a fun protest it's like a protest but fun and he's like does it look like I'm having fun here
That's
but
hilarious, man.
we that's basically what it is. So that's probably the second most common. Their most common is like audiences, like kind of having people in like a music venue or like for listening to speeches and stuff. But so it's a mix, but we do all kinds of things and it's really fun. And if you want to check us out, crowdsondemand.com, or follow me on Twitter at CEO Adam Swart. That's Adam Swart.
Awesome, man. We'll link that stuff in the description down below. I'd love to
Yeah,
have you back on again sometime.
anytime.
And
That
until
was fun.
then, we'll get together again sometime. And until then, man, you be safe out there.
Thanks, Ricky. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Adam. We'll see you guys later.